And also, if you're not speaking, are you able to please mute your phone? Okay,
Oh my
it looks
God.
like we're live.
That's why I'm leaving the area. So that's why we got on my other line.
Oops, wrong one. It looks like Mr. Mitchell is still connecting. Mr. Mitchell, can you hear us? Mr. Mitchell, I think your phone is muted. Okay, well, we're here today because it's the bi-monthly meeting of the Historic and Cultural Landmarks Commission. Our chair, Mr. Mitchell, is in the process of signing in. Dr. Herring, while we wait for him, do you want to call our meeting to order?
No problem. At this time, I call the meeting of the City of South Fulton Historic Cultural Landmark Commission to order. Roll call.
Okay, let's see. There he goes again. Okay, Miss Shakia Guest. Who's Dr. Anidi? Okay, Dr. Anidi, you're just in time. We're doing the roll. Dr. Lynn Anidi.
Present.
Miss Sybil Talley.
Present.
Dr. Sean Herring.
Present.
Charles Mitchell. And I think he's still in the process of signing in. Miss Carmen Howell Ferguson. I think she's muted, but I see her on the call. And Miss Elizabeth T. Miller.
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Chairman, it looks like we have a quorum. Mr.
Thank
Mitchell,
you.
can you hear us now? Okay, I think Mr. Mitchell is still logging in. So the first.
Actually, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing on our agenda is approval of the minutes from July 20th.
Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes yet?
Yes.
Yes.
I was not here for the entire meeting, but and I can't really speak to a lot of the what happened before I got in the meeting. So I'll have to accept an approval without my review. So anyone care for a motion to approve?
I recommend that we accept the minutes of the last meeting as amended.
Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So to the public that's watching our meeting, If you have any comments today, please feel free to reach out to us on the planning email address. It's planning@cityofsouthfultonga.gov. And and we'll read out your comments, and that's a great way to reach us after the meeting too. If you would like to participate, have any questions, have any comments, or if you want to send in any information from our survey. So the first thing on our agenda today is a summary of the survey responses we've received so far. In total, we've received a total of 3 new survey responses. One of them was for the Welcome All Road Cemetery at 4582 Welcome All Road. It was established in 1908 and it's the resting place of over 250 community residents. It's located in District 3. And the other one I'm still doing some research on. It's Bethlehem Baptist Church and Cemetery, and it's located in District 4 near Cedar Grove Road. We also have another submission, which is Easton Cemetery on Valley Lake Road off Stonewall Tell. We're still doing a lot more research on that one. I got someone that sent us a message to let us know where it is. And I was looking for it on Google Maps, and I'm still trying to locate that plot of land. And so I'll provide some more information on that one after I have an opportunity to research it some more.
Marissa, you may want to add the Red Oak Cemetery as well. Or not the Red Oak, but there's a Red Oak Cemetery just before you get to Washington Road, as well as the Owl Rock Cemetery on Campbellton Road.
Okay, let's add those. Owl Rock.
Yes. It is the, matter of fact, it is the historic marker that we have on the website.
Awesome. And then you said Red Oak?
Yes, there is a cemetery there. It has been vandalized. We need to go ahead and hopefully if we could get in some sort of, even though it is a state ordinance, but a cemetery protection ordinance might be, as we're moving towards, that might be helpful.
Yes, most definitely. And you said the Red Oak one is near what?
It's actually across from the former Red Oak Post Office site, just south of Washington Road, or actually would be southwest of Washington Road.
I will add that to the spreadsheet.
Marissa, I have a few that I would like to propose as well.
Okay, awesome. Do you guys want to send me an email with all of them and then where they are and maybe photos, and we can add them to our spreadsheet as well?
Okay, do you want those?
So, Miss Tally, where is your cemetery?
Okay, there's the Union Christian Church Cemetery in District 2. There's the Enon. There are 2 Enon churches, both on Stonewall Tell. And I had a chance to visit all 3 of these cemeteries Saturday before last with the pastor of Union Christian Church.
Okay.
So I would really love to get those in. So there's the Enon Baptist Cemetery, and then the church, the cemetery that is across the street from the Enon Church.
Okay, writing it down. Okay, awesome. And if you guys also shoot me like a message with all of the information that you have on these, we can go ahead and add those to our list. And that will bring us to the next portion of the meeting that we're going to cover in a few minutes.
May I ask, is Forest Lawn Cemetery in our City of South Fulton district? It's right off of, it's right off of Roosevelt Highway. It's a big cemetery, huge.
It might be.
I'm sure it's at least 50 years old.
I think I know which one you're talking about, and I think it might be, but I can double check for you before our next meeting.
Okay, it's down from 2 schools, Banneker and I forget the other school, middle school or elementary school.
Yeah, we can definitely check on that. What did you say was the name of it?
I think it's Forest Lawn.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Real big.
Forest Lawn.
And I know it has to be at least 50 years old.
Definitely, we can look into that.
Okay.
So for the Welcome All Road Cemetery, I have actually spoken with the property owner. I spoke with him a few years ago, and since we have this initiative, I reached out to him again yesterday, and he provided a lot of information on it. These are some photos of it. This is what it looks like from the street. Here's one of the markers there. And he was able to send me some blurbs about some of the people that are residing there. One of them in particular was a man from College Park. He was in the Army and he died of pneumonia. He was a very young man, and here's a picture of his marker. And then he was also able to send me some more stories about people that were buried there. He said on November 11th, 1939, James Gillette, 24 years old, was driving a city dump truck in College Park when it ran up an embankment, tragically turning over onto him. That's very sad. And then this one, 8-year-old Verlin Gis was on his school playground in Atlanta in 1929. And sadly, some rocks he was playing on fell and crushed him. Dallas Hudgens was a much remembered bus driver in the late 1930s and 40s. And then John Comer Harris was born on July 7th, 1890 in Campbell County, Georgia. John was a farmer, as most young men were. On August 28th, 1918, he was inducted into the United States Army at Fort Gordon, which was where the Peachtree DeKalb Airport is today, about 12 miles east of Atlanta. Unfortunately, the Spanish flu had hit Camp Gordon in September, and John obviously died from it because his death certificate notes that he died in the camp infirmary on October 21st, 1918, of lobar pneumonia. And so this is an example of some of the stories that we might want to get to go along with the cemetery. With the pictures of the cemetery and all of that kind of stuff. It'll help us with the text for our Arcadia book. And it's also just helpful for the community to have a record to remember some of the people that are buried there, and it helps to tell the story of those that came before us. So it's good to have kind of as much information about the people there as we can.
Marissa, another resource is the Atlanta Historical Society. Franklin Garrett, as part of his master's or doctorate when he was going through school, actually went out and inventoried a lot of the cemeteries around the Atlanta region. And I visited him one day, and when I was doing some research on the Conley Family Cemetery in East Point, I didn't think he was taking much in when I was talking to him about it, but he walked around his desk and up to his bookshelf and pulled down 2 large ledger books that he had. And he went in and flipped a few pages and then flipped a few more pages and then said, "Oh, here it is." And then he turned the book around so I can see it. "Do any of these names look familiar?" And he had recorded as best he could all the names on the headstones in each of the cemeteries that he looked at. These ledger books were like maybe 11 by 18 and probably 2.5 inches thick. So a trip to the Atlanta Historical Society, if anyone is down that way, might be appropriate, because I know these books are available to research. I'm hoping that by now they would have been put online, but I haven't found them.
That's an awesome idea. Maybe one day we can organize like a group field trip to go down there and maybe do some research and see what they have.
Where are they located?
They are at the Atlanta Historical Society at the Swan House, which is up in Buckhead.
Okay. Thanks.
Marissa and Commissioner, I also want to mention that Pastor Thames over at Union Christian, also has recorded a number of the headstones in that particular cemetery that's attached to the church. And he's shared with me the written documentation of that too. So we might have a lot of information available to us. We just probably have to really start talking more to some of our pastors, or, if the cemetery is attached to a church. But there may be a good place for church records. He was very gracious and showed me one of their church history books, so recording similar information. And it was amazing just to see how far back, this was recorded.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like we have a lot of resources in the community.
And Marissa, this is Dr. Aniti. I just forwarded you an email. It's an Excel sheet regarding all the cemeteries, primarily of the county of city of South Fulton, that you can share with everyone. And it has a lot of other information there regarding African American Gateway, the ACPL Genealogy Center.
Mm-hmm.
It has links there, and also another link for, what is this one? The HGC, which is the Metro Atlanta chapter there, that we can get information about historical sites as well. And it can be shared with everyone. This is the information that I had indicated to you all last time I would share, and never had the opportunity to do so. I had to be out of town for personal business. I wanted to share with you today, and everyone can have a view of that. It's an Excel sheet, so it should be helpful.
That's great.
Sounds like it could be.
Can I ask a question? So do you guys think that there is an interest from the commission to do maybe like a show and tell at our next meeting? Because it sounds like you guys have a lot of really cool and interesting information too. So what if at our next meeting, we just kind of had like an open show and tell where you guys could come and share research and things that you found too? Does that sound like something that you guys might be interested in?
Sure.
Do you think that by next meeting, I think it's a great idea. I just don't know how ready we'll be by next meeting.
Yeah.
Planning for it, maybe for the one after that.
Okay, so next meeting is in November. So does that sound like something that you guys would like to do maybe in January then?
I didn't mean to put back the time, so let you all decide that you want to try to know.
Okay, well, I'll leave that out there. And when we're working on the agenda for the next meeting, I will leave that out there, and you guys can let me know if there's interest in that, like doing like a show and tell maybe from the commissioners. I think that's a really good idea.
Marissa, I think it's an excellent idea. Let's see how much information we pull together between now and the next meeting. And it may be even appropriate to have a separate historic presentation meeting.
Right.
And that we could invite and publicize to the public that we're going to have a history lesson for the community or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we can advertise it and get it out to a wider group.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. So, did you guys have a timeline in mind for when you might want to do that?
Let's see how we come along on pulling all this together. I'm excited that we're pulling together this information. We're finding this info out. We have a large number of family cemeteries also in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and let's not overlook those as well.
Most definitely. So
Let's just touch base between now and the next meeting and see how we're coming along on how much data we have pulled together, so that we can have maybe at least a 30 or 40 minute presentation.
okay, I think that's a good idea.
So we would probably have a separate meeting in October, kind of like a, ad hoc meeting or whatever, to kind of plan more for this to be presented in November, or I'm asking, I don't know, I'm not
That
sure.
that sounds good. I mean, I think that's a perfectly good idea. I think that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Marissa, let's just you and I touch base in about a couple of weeks. Anybody else that wants to join in, let's see how we're coming along on pulling together the information and see if we can come up with a target date and get the group back together and discuss it.
Sounds great.
And you all will send out the information that Dr. Needy talked about that she has.
Yes, I can forward that email to you guys as soon as the meeting is over.
Very good.
Awesome.
Marissa, is there any chance, and y'all have something like a Dropbox that we can actually set up to where we can actually just a central point repository of this information that we can make available to our members, that they can go on and take a look and review the information?
Yeah, we actually have a SharePoint site, but my challenge with it is that I don't think people outside of staff have access to it. And Miss Guest, who isn't here today, said that she was interested in starting a Google Doc.
Right, that's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, and I'm not, and she said that she had sent us a link to it before. But I can email her after the meeting and ask her to resend us the link to it. And so on the Google Doc, people can just deposit the information that they have already, and we can kind of share it amongst ourselves, and everyone will have access to it. And so I think she sent us the link already, probably like a year ago. And so I can double check with her about that link and look for it again. And I think that was kind of the direction we were going in terms of sharing this information, but I'm not sure we had gotten it all the way organized.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Dana, do you have anything to add?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Okay, awesome. So the next one I want to talk about was Bethlehem Baptist Church and Cemetery. This one is in District 4, and this map is not to scale, but this is Rivertown Road, South Fulton Parkway, and then there's a little side street here, Bethlehem Road, and the church is located there. These are some images that someone sent over. This is the old church that was originally built, and then I think it was redone to be brick later on in 1949. And then this is what it looks like today. It's still pretty similar to the original one. It has an addition here. And I think the steeple and the doors are different, but it's still very close to its original condition. And it has a huge cemetery back here. So this is some more research that someone had sent to me. And so I think that once we have everyone's information together, we can expand on this and do, a wider show and tell. And I think that'll be awesome. Are you guys ready to move on to the next item on our agenda?
Sounds good. I think there are a lot of churches, though. We could actually probably have an entire chapter devoted only just to churches, as well as their cemeteries.
Yeah.
So I think this is an excellent idea. I think the format that you have put together there is appropriate.
Okay, awesome. So as always, to the community, we are collecting responses. Please, please, please feel free to go to our survey and also send us an email at planning@cityofsouthfultonga.gov. Here's a link to the survey, and it's open to the public, so anyone can go in. We have a long way to go before we reach our goal, so as much participation from the community as we can get is awesome. And if you want to learn more about the commission, please also go ahead and log on to the city website and read about the work that we're doing. So as we're in the process of finding all of these awesome cemeteries and churches, and since a lot of them aren't cared for well, and they're vulnerable to like looting and graffiti and things like that, we are in the process of the city of thinking about if we wanted to have a cemetery preservation ordinance and what types of things might be in it. And so far what we have is duties of owners and trustees with like upkeep of the property. So that means just taking good care of it, picking up trash, cutting grass and things like that. Guidelines for what to do if a cemetery is found that isn't known or recorded. So let's say that you're building a grocery store and it turns out that, you know, during your construction process, you notice that it's a burial ground or an old cemetery that people didn't know about, what to do in that instance. And also an application process and timeline for cemetery preservations. And mostly the goal of doing the cemetery preservations would be just to have a record of where they are and just to have them acknowledged by council and the Historic Commission so that we have information for them on file. Are there other things that you guys think might need to be in the cemetery ordinance?
Well, Marissa, you brought up a good point. If you go into the DRI process, there is actually a section in there where you have to do an archaeological assessment, and that resource is available. It's a little difficult to get to, but there are approaching 200 sites in South Fulton that have been studied from an archaeological standpoint, identifying potential burials as well as foundations and a variety of items that might be of historic nature. And we have, I think we have about 140 that have been located in within our limits of our city. However, the university has protected the actual location of a lot of these archaeological investigations to protect them from people coming in and either damaging or rummaging or these sites. But along that line, we might do some research in that direction. However, in the interest of protecting these sites, we've got to be just a little bit cautious about how good of a location we provide. And might take a look out there. It's in the University of Georgia Archaeological Research Group. And Dr. Nita is probably already aware of that and knows how to get into that. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
I was saying that I'm wondering if you have access in some of your research to get into the archaeological research side at University of Georgia. They have actual reports of the archaeological investigations that they've done in South Fulton. However, they have protected a lot of that information to keep those areas from being damaged. In other words, somebody coming in and say, oh, we're going to go look for mini balls. We're going to go look for arrowheads. We're going to, just going in and getting into these sites and destroying whatever archaeological information might be there. I don't know. I'm just wondering whether that's too in-depth for us or whether that's something we want to utilize.
Well, I don't have any information as far as Georgia State. I'm not associated with them. However, I'm associated with Emory, but the state of Georgia, they have policies and procedures as far as like vandalizing with the cemeteries. And, I thought it would be maybe ideal to include maybe a link in anything we have in our content and elements like that, or it already may be available when they do the outlines of the application process and timelines, things of that nature. But I thought that would be viable to include. The archaeological information I included, you all will see the link when she shares the email. It's a little bit different. It's very specific to historical artifacts here in Georgia. And that may be of some interest. So please take a look at that. So that's what I wanted to add on that.
Okay. Well, what we're finding is that there are a lot of other resources that I was not aware of. And that information I was discussing was actually at the University of Georgia in their archives. And it is listed and inventoried by county.
Oh, okay. Well, that may be interesting. And so are you under the impression that anyone can just maybe go to the library to find that information, or you're saying it's very specific?
No.
To Georgia State?
No, it's actually it's protected.
Okay.
In other words, you actually have to have clearance to get into these files because of their sensitive nature of the areas and the artifacts that might actually be on those sites. They have limited the number of people that can actually do the research.
Okay.
So it's going to take somebody either with an archaeologist and they're registered with the state. I understand they can get into those files, or there's a list of about six or eight other people that can that are allowed to research those files. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them.
Yeah, I tried. I'm not one of them either.
I'm not one of them either. So
Yeah, I think that in the future, within the next couple of years, we'll probably try to do a historic resources survey. And that's the thing where you hire like an actual historian and archaeologist to do research for you. And so that person within the next couple of years will probably be able to get into that. But that's not something like Storm said already. I'm just repeating what he said, but yeah, that's not something that we have access to right now. Because I definitely tried.
Marissa, is it possible any developer that has to come before the city with a rezoning, they have to do a DRI, they actually have to go through those hoops and hurdles to have an archaeologist go out. Do you have access or know how we might be able to contact some of these archaeologists to find out what kind of costs are involved in doing this?
So I did reach out. People don't necessarily like to quote a price. They like to say this, they like to give a number. So I reached out and some people said like, we charge $50 per monument or $50 per parcel or something like that. And they said it's going to depend a lot on how many there are, what's going on in the city, things like that. So it is something that we've looked into, but we're still in the very much preliminary stages of that. And for DRIs, some rezonings require DRIs, but I think it's only about 10 or 15% of rezonings will require them. Most of the time, rezonings don't meet the threshold for a DRI. It's based on traffic, and DRIs have to have a certain number of trips And they need to be like very
Right.
large scale requirements for the state of Georgia to require DRIs. So most of our rezonings don't actually have DRIs required.
Okay.
And I think
Real
that,
quick, I apologize. A DRI is a development of regional impact. And what we're discussing is the fact that a developer may bring in a proposal that requires a rezoning, and a development of regional impact has to be signed off by ARC. Actually, they do a review on the project to determine what kind of impacts it will have to the infrastructure, to schools, and all this sort of stuff. And that's what the DRI is. It's the process of a, I don't know, Marissa, help me out here, Dana, that is a process above what the city has to review at the ARC level.
yeah. So a
Yeah, I agree.
DRI is basically a traffic study, but it's a very detailed traffic study. So I think that I think that normally they'll have to do archaeological research if it's somewhere, if they're doing a development that is right next door to a cemetery, or if it's at a cemetery. So DRIs are a good place to start sometimes, but most of the time they won't have a lot of archaeological data that go with them. And so if we go back to the ordinance that we're thinking about is probably our best bet for figuring out where the cemeteries are and gathering data on them. And so that's why we're proposing the cemetery preservation ordinance, to try to figure out where the cemeteries are and to help us get information that can help us preserve them and keep them safe. Is there anything else that you guys think, is there anything, when we talk about the ordinance, is there anything that really jumps out to you guys, or anything that you'd really like to add to the ordinance, or things that you think should be included in it to help us preserve the cemeteries and do the research on them?
Well, your discussion revealed something a few moments ago. What if someone goes to one of these properties and finds an item?
Yeah.
Do you have any comments that would cover that particular issue or concern? You know, how people go sometimes and they find old artifacts on properties. Do they keep those artifacts, or do they turn them into a certain location? What happens at that juncture?
So they're supposed to turn them in per the state. I was doing some research, and I think they're supposed to turn them in per the state requirements. And if it looks like there might be a burial ground, you're supposed to stop and call the Fulton County coroner. And so our ordinance that provides guidelines on what to do if burial grounds are discovered in a lot of ways will mirror our county and state regulations that are in place.
Okay. Got it.
I have a
Excellent
question.
point, Marissa. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about the ordinance. Does it make any provisions for like markers for certain historical cemeteries? I've been in other counties where they have some of their, I guess, historical cemeteries designated with a sign. Does this ordinance provide for that?
The ordinance is still in the process of being drafted. And so we could definitely add that, like that cemeteries are required to have signage, or we could ask that, or in order to be on the preservation list, that the cemetery needs to have signage. So that's a good idea of something that we can include.
Thank you.
Marissa, you've done a great job of getting your arms around the cemeteries, but are we also looking at bringing on the other landmarks that we might need to preserve as well? Can we just extrapolate this ordinance a little bit to also include our historic landmarks. If we determine that there is a building or structure or something that we might need to include as well, can we expand this enough to include those items, or do we need to make a separate ordinance for that?
That's actually a great question. I think I would recommend having separate ordinances for different things at this time. I think that I'm a little bit worried that if it's too inclusive, it might leave out some of the specificities that are required for different landmarks, because a cemetery as a burial ground requires a different type of attention than another monument like a school or something like that. And they're equally as important, but I think that they might require special attention. And so I'm interested in exploring opportunities to have additional ordinances in the future that address other monuments, because as you said, I think that's very important.
Well, I was just wondering whether we could expand this to include also, when you were showing the churches and everything, we have quite a few churches that are well in excess of 50 years old.
Yeah.
And we could also incorporate or include those as well with this. But I mean, if it's more appropriate to separate those, I'll yield to the group as to whatever they want to do, or possibly even some legal advice as to how best to put these ordinances together.
Definitely. That's definitely a good point. Dana, do you have anything to add?
I was just agreeing with the separation of the cemeteries and the buildings, because a lot of times you could have the history of materials, you can have the history of how the building was built. And if someone is proposing some type of addition or renovation, then that's going to require a different procedure in terms of how it's reviewed.
That's a great perspective, Dana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point, Dana. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Marissa, thank you very much for this presentation.
Well, while we're at it, just one quick thing. So we mentioned a lot of cemeteries that people have come across. So are you all proposing to take pictures of those and send them to us because you kind of crossed them?
I think it's a great idea if you have time to slow down and actually, if you can, get out of your car and take a photo and capture the cemetery as best you can. And if there's a marker or something on it identifying the cemetery will be helpful too. I'm thinking of about a half a dozen.
Right, in a safe way on the street, being careful. My second question was, or proposal, is that if someone pulls some kind of archives and that goes to the state, it almost seems like whether it's our commission, you guys, or in association with the city of South Fulton, that we should check periodically with the state, because we don't know exactly if someone went out there researching to see if they find any archives, or I forgot the word that Dr. Herring used. I'm tongue-tied for that one right now. But just to keep up to see on a monthly or bi-monthly basis if things were submitted or any archives were submitted to the state, so that we can kind of tie ourselves in with the state with that particular item that was found.
Good point. It's just a matter of how we make that connection.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely. Does anybody else have ideas or recommendations for the preservation ordinance before we go on to the next slide? Okay, so to move us to the next thing, because we're running out of time, our current zoning code requires that we have use permits for new cemeteries or expanding existing cemeteries. And the current ordinance isn't very detailed. It talks a lot about buffering and ingress and egress, but I was looking at what some other jurisdictions are doing, and their cemetery requirements are a little bit, their requirements for new or expanding cemeteries are a little bit more detailed. And it has requirements on what needs to be on the survey, minimum acreages. I think a lot of them are 1 or 2 acre minimums, buffering so that there are trees and the cemetery is kind of sheltered from neighboring uses, requirements for getting in the cemetery and getting out of it, setback requirements so that it's not in a floodplain, fencing, marker requirements, as Commissioner Talley mentioned earlier, and then a provision that just says that they're required to follow county and state requirements for the proper burial of a body, and other artifacts associated with burials. And so I was also thinking about making a text amendment to the zoning code to talk about the cemetery use permit and changes that we might make. But like I said, again, that's something that we're still talking about, and it's something that hasn't been completely written about yet. But as the Historic and Cultural Landmarks Commission, I wanted to bring that to you all so that you could provide an opinion and feedback and recommendations on what you think about it.
I think this is appropriate for the city to have it at a zoning level. I'm just concerned, we need to make sure that we are consistent, as you've said here in the last bullet point, that we're consistent with the state and county requirements.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that there are some requirements out there we need to be sure that we dovetail and we're in compliance with. Would hate to think that we might have an opportunity to have a number of people wanting to start setting up private cemeteries.
Yes. So the city of South Fulton doesn't own any city cemeteries at this time. So I think most cemeteries, and I will double check on this to make sure that it's factual. But at this point, I don't think that the city owns any cemeteries. I think most of the cemeteries are private cemeteries already. And we haven't had any information from people about new cemeteries that they'd like to start. Most of the information or questions that we get are from people that have existing cemeteries. And a lot of them are associated with older churches and they're just running out of space. And so they've come to us once or twice since I've been here to just ask about expanding the cemetery. But if someone does have a piece of land and the zoning code does allow for them to get a cemetery with the provision of a special use permit, I think it might help the city to just kind of be a little bit ahead of it, to have requirements and things in place so that it's managed and handled appropriately and it's done thoughtfully. And so I think that's the goal of the cemetery use permit ordinance and the change to the zoning code. What do you all think about that?
I think you've identified a appropriate place for us to be involved as far as helping set up the use permit.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're dovetailing and not interfere or not having anything in conflict with the state or county codes, I think it's appropriate. Appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I think it is something that we might be able to lend some input to, but again, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Okay, awesome. Does anybody else have anything to add before we go to the next slide? Okay. And so the next thing I want to talk about was I've seen other organizations that have an Adopt a Cemetery program. And so after people go through the process of having their cemetery recognized through the cemetery ordinance, it begs the question, like, what do we do now? And I've noticed some other municipalities that have an Adopt a Cemetery program, and it allows sororities, fraternities, HOA groups, and other citizen groups to adopt a cemetery. And basically, they would work with the property owner to identify a scope of work. And once a week, once a month, bi-monthly, depending on what they agree on with the property owner, they would go to the site, trim some hedges, pick up some litter, wash off graffiti, cut the grass. And so it kind of keeps the cemeteries well maintained for future generations. And of course, it would be something that you all would help with because the Historic and Cultural Landmark Commission would review applications at the bi-monthly meeting and then pair community groups and volunteer groups with the cemetery. So you kind of be like a bridge between the two. And it will kind of help us to take care of the cemeteries. And so is that something that you all are amenable to?
I mean, it's a great thought and great idea. I'm not sure how you get a group to volunteer to come forward to help take care of these things, because I've been involved with this in the past, and it's very difficult to get a group to go out and do a cemetery cleanup more than maybe 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And most they require constant maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that we have out there now that are in good shape are typically handled by churches,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a large collection of people that you can spread the duties out, or they have the resources to have a landscape company come in and take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the most, I agree that it'd be helpful to have a group to come in and pick up some of these cemeteries that are in bad shape and have been neglected. I just don't know how we stimulate that interest or that level necessary to actually take these on as continuing projects.
I would have to agree with that, because I noticed that there are a lot of sororities and fraternities are engaged in clean the highways type projects, but this would be either a one-time situation that we're talking about as far as adopting a cemetery program, or is it a twice a month, once a year? I think you have to define the parameters of what you're asking persons to do, because if people have no association with this particular project, and especially if it's not in my community, then your behavior, your attitude may change in terms of longevity. How long can we keep this program going that's meaningful? You know, any community would tell you that why start something if you're not going to be there for the end run or for the longevity of it? Because that's not showing that we really care. We just cared for the moment. I might be wrong in my assessment of what I'm saying, but I think when you look in terms of what this is proposing for us to do, 1 shot in the arm, 2 shots in the arm, or can we get a sorority or fraternity just like they're cleaning up the highways, and that's a constant, but they have a stretch of highway that they clean. I'm sure you're aware of the program. So I think that's something that we need to take and look at, but the longevity would be my concern.
Doctor, thank you. That's well put. Marissa, I think you've planted a seed for us to think about, and we can come back with this and revisit this down the road as we've had a chance to cultivate some ideas that we might be able to stimulate some interest in this. But as Dr. Herring says, it may be difficult to get people interested right up front. It's unfortunate. I'm involved with quite a few volunteer groups right now, and it's been difficult to get the groups who normally do stuff interested in doing anything right now. So I think it's a great thought. Let's think about this as we move ahead, and maybe it's something that we can all think about and maybe come up with some ideas between now and the next meeting.
All right. I think that's a great next step. We're running out of time here. So the next thing on the agenda was the cemetery story map. And it's really cool. Our GIS department helped us with this. And what they did was they made a map of South Fulton, drop different pins about where the cemetery is. And if you go to the pin drop, it will show you where the cemetery is. And it'll have a little blurb about it. And since we're out of time, I will email you all that link. You can look at it after the meeting. And we can go back to it after 2:00 if you'd like. But since I know some of you have to go, I just want to go on to our next point, which is the street renaming committee task force. Our city council adopted a resolution last month, which will, and what the resolution does, it empowers city council to designate community members to serve on a task force. The task force will review street names in our city that might be associated with racism or the Confederacy, and the task force will recommend new names for those streets. And this is over a 6-month time frame. Council is in the process of appointing citizens to the task force, but the resolution calls out the Historic and Cultural Landmarks Commission and says that we will work in conjunction with the task force. And so I just wanted to let you all know that was coming down the pipeline. If there are streets that you know of that perhaps might be eligible for a renaming, go ahead and start thinking about those a little bit. And maybe do some research on it. I'm going to see if I can get a list from Public Works, but this is on pause right now while council is nominating citizens to the task force. But since it was adopted by council, I wanted you all to be aware of it, just to let you guys know until it's something that is ready to be worked on.
Thank you. Actually, I think this is a extremely slippery slope, because I mean, I'm not sure exactly what kind of qualifications they're going to use to determine whether a name is appropriate or not. I think it's a very difficult thing to determine whether something needs to be renamed because of an association. So when they find out that there was a General Baker and a General Willis and a General Rowell and a General Wolf, do we get those names changed as well? So this is going to be a very difficult process. And I'm really not sure that it's really something that the city needs to concentrate on. I think we have much more critical things, but then again, I'm not the one that's upset about this sort of stuff, and other people may very well be upset, but I think there are more critical items that the city needs to be involved in. But that's my opinion.
Okay, that's good to know.
We will assist in any means necessary to help move this along if we have to. I am also a little bit upset that they have left the committee to determine their own parameters. I would hope that there would have been a little bit more guidance from the council as to how they would make these determinations and set up their own guidelines and rules.
Yeah.
So
I think
I think that there will be a stern vetting process in regards to if there needs to be changes done within the streets or whatever that they are looking at. But the only concern that I have in terms of that is, number one, the vetting process and the time frame. And I think when you're talking 6 months time frame, are you really doing due diligence? Because it's going to take some research in order to vet these, if there are any in the area. So my concern would be the longevity in terms of the 6 month time frame, because that means someone is going to will have to be working 24/7 depending on the volume that they are trying to review. Because just like anything else, sometimes people look at history and do not vet things properly. And then that's where you have these abundances of concerns in my regards, and not just my concern about it. So that's just my
Doctor, I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think you're absolutely correct. This is not something. This is almost a full-time research project, and really as to what I mean. The name Sandtown, that was a location of an encampment. The same for Campbellton. There was an encampment there. I mean, where do you stop this sort of, the deliberation on things that may be associated with the Confederacy? It's history. It's something that happened. And we have to move on and make the best of it. And I think there's more appropriate things to be concentrating on, but nevertheless, we'll move ahead with it. But I agree with you. This is going to be a major involvement on whoever is nominated to this task, and then like you said, we're going to have to vet what they're actually coming back to us with. If someone decides Stonewall is inappropriate, Stonewall was actually the name of a wall that was made out of stone, and it wasn't, to my knowledge, it wasn't named for anyone in particular. It was from this location to this location, Tale, Georgia, which used to be Cliftondale, or Cliftondale used to be Tale, Georgia. Excuse me. I really don't have any others that just pop out that would seem to be offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think there are too many other things to be worried about.
Yeah. I mean, it's still very much in the preliminary stages. And I was just sharing the resolution, for situational awareness.
Marissa, this is kind of an off-the-wall question, but since we're talking about renaming things, is the city of South Fulton ever going to get a real name?
That is not something that I have talked to a lot of people about.
Oh, okay.
So I can't tell you. Right now my business card says City of South Fulton, and so that's the name that I'm not sure if the city is getting a new name or what the conversations about that have been. So I really can't tell you.
Gotcha. Off the wall.
Initially,
Yeah, I haven't heard anything definite on that. So.
Initially, we did have the name of Renaissance, and people were in an uproar over that. So then they went to City of South Fulton and said, we will relook at this at a later time, but we're dealing with having to change a lot of stuff with the post office and names everywhere, etc. So I really wish we could settle on something, but they didn't like Renaissance, so.
Yeah, I think I'd heard that. Well, thank you. I know that was a strange question. I just just thought about it.
Well, thanks for your time. That concludes my presentation. If you guys have additional time, would you like to see the story map?
If you can put it up for us, is it appropriate? Let's go ahead and close the meeting and adjourn the meeting, and then anybody that has the time to hang around, we appreciate Marissa showing us, walking us through this, if you have the time as well. But anyone else have anything for the good of the HCLC this afternoon? Well, I'll entertain the motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Thank y'all for participating today, and Marissa, turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks. So here, and I also just want to give a huge shout out to our GIS department. They do a lot of really great work with us, and they are responsible for making the story map. And so thank you so much. And I think the person that made it, his name is Reddy, and we are very appreciative of him having him on our team, and he helps us with a lot of stuff. But here's the story map that they made. And so can I zoom out? I can zoom out, right? So if you zoom out, this is, zoom back in. So if you zoom around, this is South Fulton, and each one has a button. And so if you click on it, it takes you to that place, and you can see some pictures of it, and you can do some reading about it too. So I can zoom in here, and it can show you where it is. So this is the cemetery, and it says Browns Lake Road near Campbellton, Georgia. The cemetery contains approximately 14 graves with only 5 markers. And each one has kind of a story about it. So if you go down to the next one, and I click on 2, it takes me to the second one. So Alderhold Kolb Cemetery, this cemetery is next to and across the pipeline from 1700 West Park office off Fulton Industrial Boulevard. This area was once part of the Campbell County, but now it's Fulton County. And you can zoom in even more. We'll go back to 2. And then you can zoom in even more, and it tells you kind of where it is. And you can see this one is pretty wooded. But I just thought this was a really cool tool. And as we begin to get additional information, we can add pictures and stories and other cemeteries to the map so that they're easily identifiable, and so that the information is shared with the community. And it's a good preservation tool. I feel like if people know that people know where they are, and people are watching them, and people care, maybe they'll be less vulnerable to vandalism, graffiti, and looting and things like that. So I'm going to send you guys a link to this. And we're also going to put this on the HCLC. We're going to put this link on the HCLC website, but I'm also going to email it to you all so that you have that. And so I just thought it was a really cool, and I'm very appreciative of our GIS team for putting this together for us.
Marissa, this is a great product. There is one other thing that I failed to mention. Mm-hmm. Maybe the GIS department already is aware of this, but there is a website called Find a Grave, mm-hmm. and you can go in and search by the area. And this very well might be where they got this information from, mm-hmm. but call it to their attention.
It was. They did find a grave. Uh-huh.
They did? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's awesome. And I won't click through the whole thing. I think it's about 20 or so, 20 or so places. And some of the ones that you guys already mentioned is on here. And so we can just add to it as we continue to gain more information. But thanks so much for your time, everyone. Did anybody else have any more questions before we log out?
No, thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody. Have a good
everyone.
one.
And thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dana, for your help.
Oh,
Have a good
definitely.
week.
Thank you.
Okay.